their liver and whatnot. For others, it may be brain. So there's about 6 to 7 what we call systems that really interlink with the thyroid. And sometimes through questionnaires and lab work, we can kind of tell, like, wow, that person really has like insulin issues or whatever, to where that will affect the thyroid. So yeah, there are a number of systems like brain, gut, liver, gallbladder, sometimes triggers. One big one for thyroid specifically, the reason why people have thyroid issues, one that I really find, they get an infection like a virus, or especially post-COVID. I mean, there's been an explosion of autoimmune across the board. They get Epstein-Barr or H. pylori or some C. diff or some sort of infection, and from that infection, it sets the stage for the immune system maybe not coordinating things right, and it can be a major trigger. So I guess the question for me whenever I'm working with someone is like, what is their triggers? What of that web, what's the priority list for them? You could have 100 people with thyroid issues, but the list is going to look a little bit different. So even though underneath the foundation of the program may be the same, since everyone's unique, that list could be slightly different depending on what's going on. And so that can be achieved through like asking really good questions and looking at different lab markers. I will say hormones for females is a big one too, because most of the people that have thyroid issues are females. So years ago they already they were already thinking that hormones probably play a role, since like 75% of the people with thyroid issues are female. And with that being said, guys can have it too, and hormone imbalances, but cortisol and estrogen really can manipulate they're called immune system modulators. So if estrogen's real high, immune system function will be down. It's like a teeter-totter. If estrogen is really low, then immune system function can be ramped up. And either way it's really not good for thyroid function. Same thing with cortisol, same thing. If you have a lot of stress and cortisol is real high, immune system function is going to be really down. That's why when we're under stress, not sleeping and whatnot, it's much easier to get an infection because your immune system's not where it needs to be. So I know that probably doesn't answer your question, but it kind of frames.
It did exactly.
It's a way of thinking. It's almost like studying Torah. It's like there's so many interconnections in trying to connect the dots with that. So you almost want to start thinking. That's what the big paradigm shift in even functional medicine is like. Just because someone comes to you with for example, maybe their shoulders hurt, like, I always have right shoulder pain. Well, just like the heart can refer down the left arm, your liver gallbladder can refer up to your shoulder. If it's chronic, and one of the big ones for gallbladder is right here. If someone goes, my right, all the time I have to go get cracked, pop, whatever, it could be just your organ referring up to that side, on that side. So you got to look at the big picture is really different.
I only had one other question, and then I'll turn it over so other people can ask questions. You also mentioned about that if you are waking up around 3 in the morning-ish, you're sleeping and you wake up at 3 in the morning, that there could be an issue. I remember you talking about that. And can you please remind, like I said, we were taking in a lot of information as quick as we could, but a lot of it's stuff we had never heard before, so we got some of it. Can you remind us of what the cause was for that and how to treat that?
It's an indicator sometimes. So I know in Eastern medicine they really kind of focus on this a lot, but the body has systems and that work at certain times, I'll put it that way. So from 11 to 1 is gallbladder. From 1 to 3 is liver. And that's a big time, by the way. A lot of people constantly wake up at the same time. And that's one of the first questions I ask people in their sleep. If they have sleep issues, when do you wake up? And if it's a certain time, like look at the clock, it's always that time I wake up. From 3 to 5 is the lungs. So people that have like ammonia or something going on in their lungs, they may notice they wake up at a certain time and whatnot.
What can you do for liver health? Is it just take a simple supplement, or is there different things?
There's a lot of, So there's 6 pathways in the liver, and so you could take something simple like a very common herb is milk thistle, that kind of helps with all of them. NAC is has gotten a lot of news ever since COVID. Like glutathione's another one. There's a whole bunch of sulfur-based amino acids that have a lot to do with liver function, but unfortunately, I work with so many people with autoimmunity. They have genetic things where they can't metabolize sulfur-based. They have almost like a reaction to it. So in those cases, you have to do things with molybdenum and whatnot to help their system work better. So there's ways to assess those 6 systems or detox pathways of the liver. Like one of the labs I like to run is called the Dutch hormone lab, and it tells me if an individual is able to clear certain hormones through their liver. Specifically, if I was like working with a female that their cycle's all off, or they have painful cycles, or it's long or short or not there, or whatever, by figuring out what systems pathways not working, you can very specifically supplement. Maybe they're not supplementing the right type of liver things in that. So another one I really like using is Tucca, which is almost like helps with bile and things like that. Improves bile flow by like 300%. So sometimes when people have their gallbladder removed, or one of the signs of that is constipation, and helping. A lot of the things that help the liver, gallbladder also help the kidneys as well. So there's a lot of overlap. That's the nice thing about herbs. There's like, instead of side effects, there's side benefits, and so you can. It can help in a lot of other ways. But just like anything, the more information you have, the more precise you can like figure out what pathway you may be like not working. You're kind of working in the right pathway, but maybe it could be a little bit more specific what's going on. I work with a lot of people with hair loss, and it's interesting because just like thyroid, there's a web around that as well. And the first thing I'm looking at is kidney function right away. It's kind of funny. One of my best-selling products is a hair booster thingy, and I work with a lot of the plain community, the Amish community, and they love this stuff. We had a guy that had absolutely no hair, no eyebrows even. He had alopecia, which is autoimmune hair loss. And he was able to grow his hair back. Well, I got a lot of clients from that. I mean, he had a beard and everything. So everyone else...
Pretty important in their community.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And it's, for example, it's not going to work for everyone because there's a marker on your blood work called GFR, and it's basically seeing how well your kidneys can filter blood. And you want a number around 125. So if I got a lab back and it was like 124, that's really good. But if they were half that, like 70 or whatnot, I know their kidneys. So a supplement like that's going to help them. But that's not the only thing. So I had a guy from Pennsylvania just tried that hair booster thing, and I even told him, hey, it's a gunshot approach. You know, it's going to work for a lot of people, but especially if it's a kidney issue. Well, it didn't really, and he said I felt more energy, but it didn't really, I'm not really seeing my hair grow back. It takes about 6 weeks to start really seeing a difference in hair regrowth, so you got to kind of know the time span. But long story short, he didn't get results, so we ended up doing a little bit of coaching. We did his blood work, got his numbers back. His GFR was 24. 124, so it was basically almost perfect. So it made sense why he wasn't getting results. He was already strong in that organ. So it ended up being another system for him. That's why understanding the web, like what is your issue, with that, figuring out whatever problem. So, I forgot kind of what you were talking about, but there's.
I just wanted to tell you, so we tried your thyroid gunshot approach. We had a list of the things that you recommended. We got those things, and I began to take them, and they reduced my medication.
Okay.
So then I kind of slacked off because I'm not good unless Rose when I come home at night, I'm tired.
Oh, yeah.
And if Rosa doesn't hand it to me, I usually will just skip it. So I started taking it again faithfully, and then everything stabilized again. So it seems to be, when I don't take the things you recommended, that my hormone levels, they go too low, and then when I do take it, then my thyroid function seems to work better. So
Right.
what we're hoping for is that if I continue, that I could possibly completely get off their medication altogether. And
I've had a lot of clients that have been able to do that in a number of categories, even with serious brain issues that they've been on medication forever. Just back to thyroid real quick. In the Jumpstart protocol, one of the things I recommend is selenium. Selenium is interesting. For one, it's cheap. Number two, the research shows if you take 200 micrograms of selenium a day, you're going to basically cut if you had TPO antibodies, in half. You don't have to diet, you don't have to do anything. The research just shows if you take 200 micrograms of selenium, you're going to cut your antibodies in half. That's the easiest, cheapest thing you can do if someone has autoimmunity without doing nothing else. But there's other ways too. With movement therapy, a lot of people have a lot of tension. When we get tense, our soft organ, like we got hard, soft, rib cage hard, soft, and it kind of there's a pattern to the body. Like we have 5 digits, 4, 3, we have 2, then 1, and the same thing down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like there's a design. The Creator knew what He was doing. There's a reason why our eyes are up here and not down on our toes. It'd be really dusty down there, for one. And for just being able to see. So everything is structure and function go together. So what I'm saying is, a lot of people, when they have stress, they have a lot of tension in their neck. So sometimes they can get what's called venous I can't talk. Can't get the blood returning back to their heart. So they get issues in their neck. This is a really big issue for children. If a child gets strep throat, they need to make sure that this area is able to drain. If not, it's basically, I'll put it this way, it's like a toilet that is clogged and all the toxins can't release. So it's major. If a child gets strep throat, they can have major issues if it's not addressed. Making sure it's being able to drain through the lymph and stuff like that, and down the neck and whatnot. So I've had a few clients, actually the principal's daughter had a strep infection, then just went berserk, started beating up her mom and beating up students. But she had it wasn't just a behavioral issue. She was seriously having some major side effects of her infection. And infections can be a major, I really believe that there's a lot of things in our environment that are just not natural. And they are really wreaking havoc on our health. I think everybody's been infected from COVID. Whether you got the shot or not, it's made you, it's easier to, whatever your weakness is probably, can show up earlier. We're finding more and more children, younger and younger, they're having autoimmunity that just shouldn't have autoimmunity. So, but yeah.
So my male cousin had thyroid cancer like 10 years ago, had it removed. In the last month, they were doing all of his testing, and he now has thyroid cancer in his lung, like all scattered about. So now they're like readjusting medicines and all kinds of things. So my question is, his oncologist basically said, nothing we can do, it's going to be slow growing, you're going to have this, you could live like 60 years, we'll just really keep you on like your Synthroid, da-da-da-da. So I was wondering, since he still has a piece of clearly thyroid. Is there natural supplements and things, or is that just like too far gone now?
When someone's
that.
had it removed, it's kind of like the ovary. You're going to still have a little bit produced, even if someone had radioactive iodine or they removed for like cancer or something. You're going to produce a little bit, but unfortunately, in those cases, there are some natural things, but you're stuck, really. You may have to, and that's where I'm kind of like, but we've had some people that, I'll put it this way, if you were to do something natural, you can't miss. You can't miss at all. You're going to have to be someone who's like always taking that or whatnot, because your thyroid just will plummet if not. So
then
it's
should he
difficult.
Then, like you said, should he like super support his like liver, gallbladder? Like, will that make any difference to him?
And this is,
or once it's gone, it's just.
This is important because if the problem isn't addressed, so a lot of people think, and this is the interesting thing with thyroid health, because a lot of times when people have thyroid health, 90% of it's autoimmunity and they don't know it. So they're actually, to take medications, actually not even addressing, it's a symptom. So it's like, the whole time you had a Hashimoto's, or worse yet, Graves', and you didn't know it. So what that means is the research shows every 10 years you have autoimmunity, you're going to get another autoimmune disease. So, and same thing with cancer. Just because, I'm clear there, well, you better make sure has the root cause been addressed? Or you think it can't spread somewhere else? It's the same type of thinking. It's really like thinking bigger than just whatever organ's presenting. So yeah, definitely the liver, since it's obviously a detox organ. But they're probably going to need to find out what is going on. What's their weak point, I will say, for everything we're hit with chemicals and whatnot, even though our liver can do 500 different functions, it can become overwhelmed and have issues. So it definitely does need support. Kidneys as well. But yeah.
Thank you.
Great, Dr. Haney's here, so if it gets too difficult, I'm passing over the mic.
I just wanted to know if you had any suggestions on how to treat clogged arteries, cardiac.
So naturally, there's a couple things. There's some really good research. So in my family, my grandpa and great-grandpa, they both had aneurysms, or stroke aneurysms. Was it aneurysms? Okay. So in my family, on my mom's side, there's a history there. So for me, there's some things I'm doing automatically. And one of them, the research on K27 is mind-boggling. If they could patent this stuff, it would be patent. K27, it's amazing, not only for the vessel, but if there's clogging at all. Like I had a client who was completely blocked. He got scanned. And in 1 year, he was completely clear just by taking K27. K27 actually takes the plaque and puts it in your bones. So if you're dealing with osteoporosis or penia or whatever, it will make your bones harder and your vessel soft and not clot. It will also prevent aneurysms. So if a pregnant lady takes K27 and they get those spider veins in their leg, just by taking K27, they'll notice that they're not actually having that as well. Now, K2 is normally with vitamin D. They both work together. So, and the cool thing with K2, there's no, it's like, kind of like melatonin. There's no death point. Like there's something like vitamin D. Yeah, you definitely don't want to overdose that. But K2, there's no death point. But it reduces strokes, aneurysms, heart attacks by almost 60%, 57%, which is there's nothing like it. So in my family, since we have that history of things, that's a pretty. That's why if they could patent K2, they would definitely do that.
What milligram?
So, and there hasn't. I know the supplement I take is like 200. Is my wife in here? She may know better than me. I think it's 1 to 200. I can't remember if it's in micrograms or whatnot. I'll have to look. But there's a couple different. I mean, it's getting. Actually, it's funny. The bovies. You know where you get K2 from? Grass-fed beef and butter. That's the man to see right there. I'll find out. I'll let you know. There actually isn't really, and that's a big dose actually. So you want to make sure that you're having D with it as well. They work together. And calcium, D, and K kind of work together. So yeah, and it makes sure. Oh, this is if Lance Armstrong would have known this, he wouldn't have the blood dope. So for athletes, this is awesome. Okay, so your mitochondria are your powerhouse of your body. It makes ATP, energy. So this research shows after 12 weeks of taking K27, you can increase your mitochondria count in your body by almost 20%. It's like blood doping. So, and it's funny because I was trying to wrestle with these the high school kids a few years back, and my legs, if you know what lactic acid feels like in your legs, or you ride bikes, like I ride down the road, like, oh, I'm done, or going up a hill, oh, I feel my legs. If you're on K2, you have endurance that, like, you don't fatigue. It's awesome. So if Lance would have known that, he could do K2. So.
Yeah, we take a K2. It's called a K2 MK7. Is that what you're talking about? Uh-huh. So you really can't. We just take it at night, but you say that you can't really overdose on it.
You can't. I would be careful if it has vitamin D with it, because if you're massive dosing it with vitamin D.
Well, vitamin D will raise your inflammation levels, correct? If you take too much.
It can backfire because a lot of people flipped out when COVID happened. I mean, you want your vitamin D up. Don't get me wrong. But we did blood tests, and I was like, "Whoa, hold on."
That's what happened. That's what happened to me because I had this blood work done, and they go, "Whoa, we got."
Yeah.
How much are you taking?
Yeah. So
so I cut back, and they dropped to.
Everything needs to be in balance. And so even if it's really good, there's a point. The only two things I know off the top of my head right now that is melatonin and K2. You could take. The amount of melatonin they studied is just astronomical. I think it's like 150,000. Nothing. So that's unique. You're almost going to never be sensitive to melatonin because that's your circadian. You would have massive issues if you had an issue with that. But yeah.
I have one more question. What causes a swelling of the feet? Not real bad, but it's not normal. Not so much the ankles, but the feet, like the top of the feet. Where normally you'd see your tendons and you'd see your veins and stuff, but it swells up to where you can't really see that stuff. You have.
Yeah, there's and kind of like I was talking about thyroid, there could be a couple different reasons for that. Like, for example, if you're driving all day long and all the blood's going down your, I don't know if you've been on a long trip and you go, wow, my feet look like they're marshmallows. So sometimes positioning and moving. It's interesting, your soleus, a muscle behind the gastroc here, you have a muscle called the soleus. Some people call it the second heart because it returns the blood back up. And it's manually done, so you have to actually move. So that's where movement therapy can be really helpful, making sure you're, if you can walk, to try to walk and move around and things like that. There are other reasons for that, and I'm drawing a blank. My mind's in like 5 different places, and I'll probably be able to answer your question better later. I'll probably leave and go, there's 5 things here that you could do. Dr. Haney, swollen feet, what do you, ankles? Amputate. Allopathy. Actually, blood sugar plays a big role too, obviously. A lot of people that do have diabetes and whatnot, they're going to have all sorts of things going on. So we'll use, one of my favorite blood sugar things is golden thread, or like the berberine family, that really helps with circulation as well. To get, especially if you have cold extremities, and I know, 'cause, like if you have a cold nose, fingertips, toes, and whatnot, that can be an issue. You want to make sure, though, if someone has spider veins and all that stuff, that something like K2 would help. And I'm trying to remember. Oh, Dan Shin, that's the one I'm thinking of. So there's an herb called Dan Shin. Is actually known for being one of the top kidney/heart. But if anyone has excess water on their lower leg, it normally will take that off. Is my wife here? She leave? Like for pregnant ladies too, that tend to have like issues with that, it can really really help. I think it's one of the herbs that's not contraindicated. So, but Dan Shin is by far, herb-wise, one of the best for the hearts and the kidneys. By the way, it's a really good one for people that think they have prostate issues. They go on Dan Shin. I mean, it's kind of too many children in here, are there? Okay, just to make sure. So people have issues going to the restroom or whatnot with urine flow and stuff like that. It really helps. And they thought the whole time it was prostate, and it may just be a kidney issue, actually. So it helps with inflammation in that. So that's a really good herb for a swelling in the lower quarter.
Would you spell that?
Dan, like Dan, then Shen, S-H-E-N.
S-H-E-N?
Yep.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to the swelling, it can be a lot of different things. So is there any determining factors that you would know whether it's like circulatory or heart?
Well, that would be, yeah.
I mean, I realize circulatory is heart, but what I'm saying is, would it be vascular or could it be like an over-enlarged heart? Is there something to determine those two
I mean,
things?
obviously, you would want to have blood pressure. Now, this is interesting. When you're doing blood pressure, you want to do bilateral because if you have a 10-point difference between right and left side, like normally I'll have people sit and do blood pressure both sides, stand, do blood pressure both sides, and lay down on the ground, like flat, and do you should do about 5 minutes in between. If there's a difference of 10 points between right and left, it may not be circulatory, the main issue. Maybe the brain's not coordinating circulation right to left. So that's one way you can kind of just is it brain or is it actually circulation? Especially if someone has a really low blood pressure and stuff like that. I've seen people where the temperature is another one too, because you can have a 10-degree difference sometimes from the top of the foot to the bottom if you measure the temperature, even with those little temperature guns or whatever. I will say the venous system return is really big. So movement in our culture is getting out and walking can be one of the best things.
So when you take blood pressure, would it make a difference whether you're taking both the ankles and the wrists or not when you're looking for differentials?
Like blood pressure, like?
Yeah, on your arm and then on your ankle.
Normally, I would just take it right here. I know some people put it on the, here, but I normally put it there. I don't put it on anywhere else.
I have a question. Is there a natural way of treating a hernia?
A lot of vitamin C and vitamin A help make collagen in the body. So if someone's deficient in those, it can be an issue. And I know for prolapse, for people that have prolapse organs, like for example, if their colon or it sags or their everything's crushed, it can be an issue. So there may be some sort of deficiency if someone's, what type of hernia is it? Is it umbilical? Where is it? Like inguinal?
It's low.
Low.
It's low. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's already happened, that's a tough one. But the surgeries, and Dr. Haney may be able to speak on this more. Some of the research I've seen on the mesh versus other things, it's not the best. So some results, some of the old school surgeries have been better, where they really, versus some of the mesh they have now using. I've had people where they've had 3 or 4 mesh surgeries because it kept failing. It would rupture again. So, Dr. Haney, you have any comment on hernias?
Yeah, amputate, yeah. Well, there's not as my wife says, there's not a essential oil that fixes it. So, but yeah, we have found that mesh. We used to put mesh on ventral hernias on top of the muscle, and that it doesn't really do anything. It just blows it off. The real problem is a hernia, or is a hole in the abdominal wall musculature. And so you need to fix it kind of like wallboard. I kind of explain it to my patients. It's like fixing wallboard. In the old times before we had mesh, you would have to literally kind of cut and paste with the fascia and the muscle. So especially in the inguinal hernias, you would have a lot of tension. You would suture the muscle fascia down to the iliopubic tract, the real big piece of fascia down there, and it was very painful. And the Schulteis method is you would actually suture 2 different fascias down there. So it was really tight as a drum, but actually
Did it work good though?
But it worked fairly well. But then you had to cut the fascia up higher over the muscle, so hopefully you won't get problems up there. So what we do now, we've moved to robotic surgery, which I think has been a game changer, kind of like laparoscopic for gallbladder surgery was. You really don't want to you want to minimize tissue destruction. Is the name of the game. And so with the robot, we go on the inside and put the mesh on the inside to distribute our pressure when we cough, when we strain, when we're lifting. We want to distribute that pressure over a larger surface area and not on our repair, not on the muscle repair, because we can't get the muscle, that whole repair back to what God designed us, or the 100% what he gave us in the beginning. I can only get it back to 60% as strong as at 6 weeks and 80% as strong at 1 year. So
There's a condition for, the recti thingy for pregnant ladies, where you may have a spreading around that area. I think was it 4 fingers, or how many fingers is considered pretty big gap. There is ways to strengthen, but you definitely need to know what you're doing, because it's not going to be necessarily doing crunches in the traditional sense. You could definitely probably hurt yourself a lot more. So, to prevent things, the intra-abdominal, that transverse abdominis, just working that muscle, which kind of makes kind of a belt around you, ties into the back. There's some definitely exercises that can help with that area, but once it's happened, that's a whole nother thing. The vitamin A and C help with collagen and things like that. People will take different bone broths or collagen mixes and whatnot, but just even a good diet with some form of protein, whether it be plant, animal, whatever, can be a good thing too.
Smoking really revs up the catabolic portion things and stops the anabolism. So it, even when you, for prevention, but even after you repair it, trying to get it to heal up, if dealing with a smoker, the recurrence rates are so much higher.
Yeah. I thought I saw in one study like an 85% failure rate with the mesh. I was like, wow, that's horrible. So.
Back to the thyroid. Is there any natural thing you can do for nodules? And then something that starts with an A. I can't think of the word, I wrote it down. But nodules at least.
So sometimes you do want to get, obviously, that stuff checked out. You don't want to be, especially if it was cancer or whatnot. But nodules can come and go, and whatnot. And I know in here I have a almost like a movement, just kind of a natural, different movements or movement routine to get things moving in that area. If there is a way to kind of manually, it's not so much on the thyroid, it's around the thyroid to kind of massage around the neck area and to make sure that area is draining properly, the venous return. So that helps big time because once you start doing that, you'll notice that those nodules are gone a lot of times when you feel like, wow, I got knots or things in my neck there. So there are some manual things you could do as well. I have a circulation cream I'll use with people that has saffron and some other like herbal mixes that if someone has a goiter or whatever or nodules, that sometimes we'll use that, or for children that have the strep infection to get that draining, get the venous return back.
And then in your thyroid book, is there any, I just read something last week about thyroid ADHD connection. Do you address that at all?
Yeah, brain fog is brain fog, the frontal lobe, specifically with brain, the biggest one that there's a direct link to is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is this little brain in the back. Its job is, so we call it see, decide, act. Or input, organize, output. So your five senses are gathering all this information. One of the main organs that organize all the information is the cerebellum in the back. And then it sends a message out to give a response, an output. Well, there is a direct link to antibodies against the thyroid in the cerebellum, and especially for two foods in particular, alcohol and gluten. And what it will if you have autoimmunity and you have an issue with that, not only will it attack your thyroid, but there's a part of called the Purkinje cells of the cerebellum, and meaning that you're not going to be able to coordinate movement properly. That's why when people are driving and drinking, they have them do the ataxia to see how well they're walking. I tell you what, if some people that have gluten sensitivity, they have gluten ataxia, they look like they've drank a 24-pack of beer. They're hitting the wall. They can't. You swear they're drunk, and no, they have a sensitivity to gluten. They can't walk. Or another thing you'll see with a lot of thyroid people, they will clip. They'll always run into like edges of things, walls. They'll misjudge because again, that's the area that determines where things are in space. Well, actually, that's parietal lobe too, but. It organizes things, and if that area is not working right, you're going to have coordination issues.
Thank you.
Real quick, I've been looking at some studies that, you read a lot, you don't know how much of it is true or not, but basically, there's a lot of things out now on metformin and side effects, and I wanted to know how you feel about that. And another one was not so much with the autoimmune, but with Alzheimer's and dementia as you age, and a red flag and a forerunner is like mucus drainage that they used to thought was coming from sinuses, now they think is coming from the brain.
Yeah, so first, the metformin question, the best natural thing for like blood sugar or whatnot is like one of the top ones is like a golden thread or any of the berberine family. Absolutely fabulous. If I see someone's insulin off the charts or lipid panel looking crazy, you can drop that stuff so fast with a golden thread. It's not funny. You have to actually be careful because if you can actually, if someone has, if they're if they have an issue with hypoglycemia, you can drop them. So you got to be careful. But golden thread is just an awesome herb because in the category of bacterial infections from a natural perspective, like say you had H. pylori or something like that, or whatnot, it's an awesome herb to have on hand. It addresses like weight loss, high triglycerides, cholesterol, insulin, blood pressure. Probably one of the number one go-to for bacterial infections. So golden thread, it is extremely bitter, and it's disgusting, but it's good to chew and eat it. So yeah.
So is that two words, golden and thread?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want with it, but I normally will chew it. There is a benefit for actually having it in your mouth because it can get tagged there, and it can. There's a lot of extra benefit, especially with certain probiotics. It can help the microbiome of the mouth as well. So.
I
want to answer her other questions real quick. So the postnasal drip thingy and the dementia, the best thing for dementia, hands down, is exercise. Hands down, it will help with that. But not that I'm diagnosing anything here. If I have a client with, because it is different if someone has Parkinson's versus Alzheimer's, this is different areas of the brain. And for Alzheimer's, they normally have an issue with acetylcholine, which is like, their long-term memory's normally intact. So if they have a family, they know the oldest children. Yeah, that's what's the name. I don't know who these new people are, but I know them over there. And depending on what stage, they're like basically 7 stages, it can get bad. It can get, people where they don't even know who their spouse is and stuff like that. So acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that's really responsible for short-term memory. For Parkinson's, it's more dopamine, but again, these is no different than the thyroid web I was talking about at the beginning. If you're just going like, oh, I have this, you're not looking at the big picture. Like, what are the other factors playing a role in this? From my point of view, it's looking at the big picture. It's a little bit different than just going, oh, wow, they have this. I definitely, as soon as I know, if you see someone, normally you can tell someone has maybe, or they're borderline with Parkinson's, if they don't blink. They look at you're like, man, this person is really listening to me really well. And they're like, they don't. And they have, and another thing, their face, the muscle tone in their face is like flat. So you think, you're like, are they depressed or whatnot? Because you'll talk to them, are you listening? Yeah, I'm listening. Are you angry with me? Or like you would actually think there was something going on. Also, constipation, the slump posture, things like that. The tremor comes later. So if you already have a tremor, that is an issue. You may want to, the first signs, there's actually constipation and rigid posture, stuff like that. So addressing those things can be huge. So I think, the postnasal drip is more pituitary, though. If people are getting a postnasal drip down in the back of the throat, the pituitary is fascinating because it controls so many of our hormones, including thyroid hormone, luteinizing hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone, a whole bunch of hormones. And I will say that is a major issue a lot of times, like when it's more of a pituitary issue. And there's things like herb-wise, you could use like a ginseng or B5, it's high in B5. And there's a form of panathine, a B5, that's a really good form if the pituitary is having issues. Gotu-kola, which is also good for the thyroid, is also good for the pituitary. So depending on what's going on, but one of the symptoms of that is that postnasal drip. down the back of the throat.
Okay, so for the last several years, I have had chronic inflammation. My markers in my blood work are always, nothing else is out of balance, vitamin, mineral, and I have a lot of stress in my life. Chronic muscle tension, things like that. I've been doing a lot of fasting, trying to do gentle detox. I've lost weight. I'm doing gentle movement, but I can't get my inflammation markers down. And my diet is like low sugar. I'm eating as much clean food as possible. I don't know if it's just all from stress or what that could be coming from.
Whenever I hear someone's like really stressed, and not that anyone in here is dealing with stress, but normally it's a lot easier to get an infection. So if things don't look like, if everything looks normal, there could be some sort of a constant presence. It's almost like having an injury. It's like a low-grade inflammation. Normally on blood work, though, I will say there is something called optimal ranges versus functional range, or there's optimal ranges and there's the lab range. So for white blood cell count, there's a lot you can tell. Like if a marker is really high or really low, it could be an indicator of certain infections. Like if it was super high, normally it could be a bacterial infection. If it was the white blood cell count, if it's super low, it could be a parasite or a viral infection. So sometimes there's other ways you can look. One of the labs I run is called the BiomeFX lab, which is an in-home stool lab. And it's neat because it goes beyond just looking to see what type of interesting things are in your gut, but it tells you, it's like a soil report basically. It tells you, you know, your prebiotics, your probiotics, what vitamins you're making. It's almost like a ground, like what's the environment like for things to grow here? So if someone had C. diff and you look at the environment, you go, well, yeah, that needs to be addressed. But by the way, golden thread again. But this environment, even if we were to address that, this is going to come right back because the environment is not right. It's almost like a farmer working with the ground. You have to get the environment right so that the infection will go away. That's one thing I'm hearing or would guess, just hearing what you're saying, trying to figure out what is that trigger causing that inflammation in the body. Because yes, there's a lot of anti-inflammatories, but it's maybe like more symptom-based. I mean,
I have a nephew who has heavy drinker, heavy smoker for a long time. Psoriasis and eczema, or eczema. They told him it was eczema for a while. He said, no, he thinks it's psoriasis, but he's doing tubs of steroid cream to try to prevent the itch, and it's driving him crazy. He quit drinking. He finally did quit drinking, and I think he's trying to quit smoking. I'm not sure, but they told him it was his lifestyle had a lot to do with it. But he's lately been doing gummies, with the marijuana stuff, and he says that helps him, but he can't do that in work,
right?
Because they drug test him.
I was about to say something about that and that a lot of times will help with certain interleukin thingies to drive down, so it does help with pain. I mean, there is research for that,
right.
But it's maybe not addressing the root cause.
Right.
And sometimes it could be autoimmune, especially for psoriasis.
Right.
So the interesting thing with autoimmune, your gut plays a big role in the immune system. So it's sometimes what I'll find out if someone has like psoriasis on like their knees or whatever, or on their head, almost like a thrush, that they have an infection. And as soon as that infection is addressed, maybe it's a parasite infection, the skin will clear up. I mean, even just covered with scabs. I had a guy, his whole back looked like it was a white sheet. He was white, but it was like caked. And in that case, it was interesting because we did a food sensitivity lab, and I didn't really think it was a food sensitivity issue. But like I was just saying earlier, it takes about about 6 weeks for the skin to really heal up, and even hair and whatnot. And he calls me up and goes, "Hey, I want you to come over and look at my back." I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" So I went over there, and this is an older gentleman. It looked like he had a baby's back. Like his skin totally cleared up. I was like, "What?" I was like, and he was in the plane community. I was like, "I wish I would have took a picture of this," but he probably wouldn't have allowed me to. He was even like, "Yeah, I wish you would have because this is incredible." He's like, "I can't." He's like, "Look at my legs." I was like, and his whole entire body cleared up. So sometimes it can be something as simple as a food sensitivity that you're having a really bad reaction to. So I worked with different people. Again, it's trying to figure out what that trigger is for that individual. And whatnot.
Last year I had a coronary. I think we talked about that before. They did a double bypass on me, and now I went in a couple weeks ago. They're like, "Oh yeah," actually right after that was like, "Oh, and something about the spot in the lung," and I'm like, "Spot in my lung? You never mentioned that to me before." "Oh yeah, we saw that a while ago," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, thanks for throwing at me now, And so they said, "Well, it's not a big concern, it's small." So they're like, "Okay, that's fine." And this time I went in and go, "Oh, and you have a slightly enlarged aorta, but not to be a concern." I'm like, "Really? I just had double bypass surgery, and I got a slightly enlarged aorta, and you're not concerned about it. Is that normal?"
Dr. Haney?
Yeah. Don't tell me to amputate. That doesn't work.
Selenium is one. There's for cardiovascular, there's a number of things you could possibly do, and sometimes there's birth defects too, where I wonder if they're here. I don't see the. Like if a child has, there's certain heart deformities where, and when I do testing too, sometimes you'll have to, if you're deficient in magnesium, there can be an issue as well. So you have to test inside, I forget the marker, but it's not just the plasma magnesium. You want to actually see if it's getting inside the cell. And for people that have heart issues or the things aren't physically meeting up correctly, it's amazing what you could just do with just simple magnesium. Okay. I think someone mentioned cramps or something like that. I mean, that may be magnesium topically can be really, really good and whatnot. So I've been using a lot of liposomals with clients that are sensitive. That way, sometimes we'll bypass digestion if people have issues with gut.
Dr. Haiti?
Oh.
You have to realize modern medicine is only interested in that's the bottom line.
Yeah, I asked him about K2, and he said, "We're not concerned." He says, "That's those things, he said, you get what you pay for with medicine." And then I'm like, "Okay." And then he says, We're not concerned about your cholesterol." I said, "Well, I've been taking this for cholesterol and stuff." He says, "We're not concerned about your cholesterol. We're concerned about your heart disease, and we want you on statins. And I cannot tolerate statins, so I won't do statins at all." And now they've got me on a shot, which is every week of, it's a shot that lowers your cholesterol. It's phenomenal. It knocks your cholesterol out within weeks. It took me down to 70.
Oh, wow, that's low.
Yeah, they had me at 70. They're like, "Oh, yeah, we like you right around there." And I'm like, "Yeah, right."
There's two stories to cholesterol. You know cholesterol makes all your steroidal hormones.
Yeah. When you can't think anymore, it's like, yeah, I'm like wondering why I'm having brain fog and stuff. And it's like, and I like start getting pains again. So I stopped doing the shot, and it was, I can't remember the name of it. This is my problem with the short-term memory even now, is that. And, they got me on that, and so I stopped doing that. But now my cholesterol's back up at 200, so. And they said they wanted under 200. We're right at 200 or under, but I don't know what they wanted at 100, but they're nuts.
In functional medicine, we actually view cholesterol a lot differently than the lab ranges typically. Like even for females, sometimes we don't mind it even being 240. I know that sounds high, but we would consider that in the optimal range. And you got to understand, cholesterol is like really important for a lot of functions. I mean, even your cells. And the liver is responsible for so, like diet-wise, it's not what people think. Cholesterol is really important. So trying to knock that out is probably, in my opinion, we could talk for a while on that. And even, I think I've heard Dr. Haney talk about cholesterol quite a bit too, and whatnot.
It was extensive in the last few years.
Yeah, the research on statins though, wow. Yeah, there's other, normally when I work with clients that are on statins, they're normally on multiple medications that deal with kind of the chemical castration that happens from statins to deal with all these other things like depression, low hormones, and all that.
I just cry a lot. My eyes leak.
Okay, so our daughter Edith, she had,
Sorry,
okay.
I was like, is
No,
there time up? What?
She had a right aortic arch and a vascular ring and was born with a pulmonary valve stenosis. So she had to have 2 heart surgeries very quickly as a baby, like infant, went to the NICU, all that stuff. And since she keeps getting echocardiograms every year and everything seems healthy, but they say that her pulmonary valve has some leakage, and there a lot of leakage. And they're like, well, when you're an adult, you're going to have to get a valve replaced. And we're hoping that it gets to the point where 3D printing with their own plasma creates their own valve, and they could do it through a stent lab. But hearing you say that there are things that could improve the overall heart health, that's not just you're going to get to an adult and we're going to have to fix it. What things should we be giving this 12-year-old to 11-year-old to help her heart health to heal and stay as healthy as possible until she gets to the point where she actually requires a physical surgery?
Or maybe she won't.
Right, yeah. And that's the same thing, and I was hoping this family was here, but they're not here because they have a son who had a very similar thing. So, and actually the doctor, they kept putting it off because the numbers and everything looked better, and also inside. And everyone's that's where the uniqueness of each individual looking at that and whatnot. And I'm not saying all the time it's always unavoidable, but there's sometimes that just by getting deficiencies in check, and I will bring up magnesium again, that seems to be a big one, especially even if there's genetic things going on, it can make a big difference. So I'm not totally sure in your case, but yeah, there are things with the heart that are kind of fascinating. This child's name also is Caleb, which is very interesting because if you know what Caleb means in Hebrew, it basically means actually means like dog, but it means like a heart like a dog. Dog's always faithful and has heart, and he had this heart issue, so it's kind of interesting that that name. But yeah.
Our kid's name means warrior.
What is her name? Her name is Warrior. Okay.
Hi. I also have a problem with cholesterol. Well, they keep telling me I have a problem with cholesterol. It's around 200 together, the good and the bad stuff. They keep telling me that I have to lower it down. They start, and it's been a while to start to kind of like, they start taking the stuff out of my diet. They first told me to get rid of eggs, to don't eat eggs. And then that will help me to bring the numbers down. So I took everything eggs out of my diet. I went to the next lab test, still high. Well, Gary, they said don't cook, don't use oil for cooking. like, okay, I use, okay, we started, then they say, well, use a healthy oil. Well, olive oil, I start going through that, clean a lot of stuff, and start taking so much out of my diet to the point that it keeps staying high.
Yeah, it has nothing to, it's liver.
And I'm like, okay, I really, and then she told, last visit, she's like, well, still high. And I told her, like, you literally have taken a lot of stuff from my diet to the point that she's like, well, eat meat without grease. Well, it's probably you're eating too much meat. I start reducing to the point that I wasn't even eating meat, okay? And my cholesterol is still high, according to them, that every single time I go with them. And I don't know what else to start, like, taking from my diet.
Right.
I took out milk, too, and I went from cow's milk to, I don't know what else to.
Right. And there are people that do have
Do I just
dairy
eat plants?
issues, egg issues. They're truly sensitive to those things. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I'm just
But
saying
a lot of times the cholesterol it's more to do with liver. Your liver is an issue. And again, like I said, there's a big difference in functional medicine versus the lab range. Like normally I want the 240 is okay. I mean, even if a woman's up at 240, it's relative to the other markers. So if you're just looking at one marker, not the big picture, it's like, where's your HDL, your LDL, and all those markers? Because if your HDL is really good, I would be like, 200 to anywhere from 200 to 240 with good HDL. Now, if your LDL was super high and the HDL was super low, and then the cholesterol was high, I mean, you got to look at the whole big picture from a health perspective, or at least from a natural health perspective. But realize that the liver has a lot to do with cholesterol. Again, from a natural point of view, golden thread is something that in our house we use a lot. It can totally change lipid panels fast. And why? Because it helps your liver. Things that are really good, that are normally the bitter, if they taste really nasty, they're probably good for you. And I can tell you what, a lot of the bitter, really bitter herbs and stuff like that, they're some of the best.
So if it tastes good, spit it out.
It's kind of funny if you do like a keto version and you get off of sugar for a while. I mean, your taste buds are kind of adjusted, and even truly fruit would. I mean, it'd be so sweet. I mean, it's like, wow, that is dessert. And if you had any, not that I remember I went off years ago. I was on keto and went off of it and had fruit. I was like, wow, that's really sweet. And don't ask me why, but I had some pop. And I had actually cut, when I was little, I had drinking pop like it was candy, like all the time. But I had a can of pop, and it was the nastiest thing. It was like just syrup. I was like, and I was drinking a lot of these. Are you gonna? Wow, this is horrible. It was, high fructose corn syrup, GMO, and everything else. Yeah, the liver. When I just as a guess, or without knowing any details, the liver is really huge when it comes to the whole cholesterol thing. It has really little to do with, I hate to say this, diet.
You put me on glutathione and the K27, and as a totally side note, my cholesterol was like, they were like, wow, this is phenomenal. What did you do? And I was like, I did nothing, because it had been on the high level. So, I mean, after the glutathione and the K27, that helped my cholesterol, and I wasn't doing anything different. Right. So, and that was for my liver, right? My liver?
The glutathione would be for liver, yeah. Glutathione is nice because it actually helps all 6 of those pathways, as long as and that's why selenium is so powerful, because selenium is a precursor to glutathione. B2 is a precursor to glutathione. Milk thistle is a precursor to glutathione. That's why everyone was using NAC with the nebulizer for COVID, because glutathione is also really good for your lungs. If you're having ammonia, breathe that in, it'll dry that stuff up.
The NAC in the nebulizer?
The NAC is a precursor to glutathione. All those are precursors to glutathione. Glutathione is a master antioxidant. So.
How do you do that? You
What?
just dissolve it in water and then put it in there and breathe it?
There's a solution, like, definitely, because some nebulizers are very specific. So if you, it's not like you put some, they have special things, because sometimes you can break it if it's like just essential oil or whatever. But yeah, you just breathe it right in, and it's powerful. It can help big time, and whatnot, especially when people if they have pneumonia or things like that.
You have the powder version.
I have a whole bunch of versions of glutathione, like nebulize. We haven't even talked about ozone.
NAC is glutathione?
It's a precursor to glutathione.
Which means what? What does it mean a precursor to?
It will help make glutathione. It's a building block. So I have a supplement called Glutathione Recycler, and it doesn't even have glutathione in it. It has all the precursors, the things that, we're trying to make. The body needs these things to make that. So it needs B2, it needs selenium, it needs NAC, milk thistle. So glutathione, you could take glutathione straight, but even some of the research shows sometimes it's better to take the precursors versus, that's why selenium, especially for a lot of cancers, is really, really, really good, because glutathione, selenium, is really good for the liver.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just so you know, it's like a quarter after.
Okay. When's this supposed to be? Is this supposed to be over?
I don't want to stop the question.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
so Beth said we could put this off until 6:30, so we've got 15 more minutes-ish if we want.
Yeah, it's fine with me. I'm not going anywhere.
My mom has high blood pressure a bit. It's ranges 145 to 175. And they said 130 is about, you don't want to really go over 130. Is that true? And is there anything she can do for that? And I have two other little things after that.
Magnesium citrate, really good for blood pressure. And I think, is Epsom salt baths, is that that's magnesium? Is that citrate, or anyone know what that is? Sulfate? Yeah, sulfate, yeah. And that could be good as well, but the citrate, I think, is the best for blood pressure. Okay. Again, magnesium is really good, especially given in a liposomal form. Seems like it does really good from a natural perspective on that. Again, there's other I'm just kind of throwing out things that can help maybe with electrolytes that may be off. Most common ones off. That's one that can make a big difference.
Okay,
really,
thank you.
Really quick.
My son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, juvenile onset. He's 16. Is there anything that can be done to help with that? I mean, he's just going to have to take insulin the rest of his life. That's
there is some
basically
interesting things, because type 1 is considered, okay, you're on medication. Now, it's too new to say what's going to happen with this, but the whole with autoimmune, I wonder if there's an infection involved, because normally there's an infection, then autoimmune hits. So if you deal with an infection, sometimes that can be helpful. But also, here back to the controversial plant, cannabis is actually, there's a lot of research on type 1 diabetes and some of the precursors in it that they think they may be able to actually reverse autoimmunity with it, and it has to do with that whole system, which is very fascinating. So this has been out for a while, but it's so new that we'll see. But I will say it is very interesting.
Okay.
Nevertheless.
Yeah.
So.
Shall I tell my 16-year-old?
Yeah, I would.
The other thing was my husband went and had just almost like this complimentary CT scan from the hospital, for his checkup. They suggested he get it for $50. So now they have said that everything is fine, but they noticed he has an enlarged esophagus or red or what
I have no idea.
should he pursue?
Inflammation.
Wasn't it- what-
Dr. Haney.
Yeah.
Any?
So I don't know, an enlarged esophagus, I'm not that too concerned about unless he's got some type of obstruction down here at the G junction. If there's a mass or anything like that, I'm not. Otherwise, a lot of times they offer these free CT scans so they can find things and get other tests and what have you. So.
So that was complimentary, only cost $50, but the one to check the esophagus is like 10,000, right?
Yeah.
Upscale or up, however you would go.
All right.
Yeah. I will say one thing about the esophagus that's kind of interesting because a lot of people that have stomach pH issues.
That's the problem.
Oh, really?
Yes, he takes Tums every day.
Oh, that's it. So if your stomach, and a lot of people get this confused, so they think they're burning up, like, oh, I have indigestion, I'm burning up, so I'm going to take Tums. Well, because of a Heidelberg capsule test that you can perform now and know exactly what the pH of the stomach is, it's completely different than we had thought. That people actually their stomach acid is not, they're too alkaline in their stomach. So this is where pH is specific to organ. And it's almost like shaking up a bottle of pop or something and the pressure building and coming back up and almost like kind of causing issues for a lot of people because a lot of these valves are pH they're hormonally and pH sensitive and to release. So that pH needs to get a very low range in the stomach, 3 to 1.8. I mean, it is really low. So if it doesn't get there, it's not going to activate the enzymes to break down protein. And that right there is huge because if you're not able to get the pH low enough, which is your first line of one of your first lines of defense for dealing with parasites, bacteria, and funguses, if you're not able to break down your protein, now you're going to have, if that goes into your small intestine and whatnot, you have a potential of having a parasite infection or whatnot. But the whole indigestion thing is a red flag that you're eating your food, but you're not breaking it down.
The thing is, Tums is, I believe, calcium bicarbonate. Calcium stimulates more acid production.
Hmm.
So the bicarbonate takes care of the acid immediately, but then 2 hours later,
Makes it worse.
something more. Medicine. It's a great product. Again, it's all about money. Yeah. And it's not full disclosure. So if you need, I always tell my patients, if you need an antacid or something like that, there's 2 different types of reflux. Like you said, there's some alkaline reflux that's coming from your bile and pancreatic secretions, reflux, stuff. Then there's acid reflux. 2 different types. But if you need an antacid, take baking soda.
And he's had irritable bowel syndrome as well. So I've been taking a lot of glutathione and selenium, and you kind of know the background to that. Can you overdose on that?
Your body will sometimes block. It's almost like insulin resistance. If your body gets too much of anything, it could possibly block. I will say that some people, they have an issue absorbing that, so you could take it in different forms, like liposomally through the skin for glutathione. There's a really interesting herb called gaduchi. That's kind of an Eastern medicine. They really use it a lot. And so they'll look at plants that, and the really interesting thing with like gaduchi and some of these interesting plants is that they notice they grow without water. And like I'll put it this way, if you break off a branch, because you know the whole, I think it's John 15 where it says a branch broke off, he's basically dead. These plants grow without soil. Like they can keep growing without soil or water. And so they went, what is that plant? Like, what, it's still growing? And so it's very interesting what it can do in regeneration, especially for the different tissues. So there's some companies that will use Guducci with glutathione together as like and put it on liposomally through the skin. So
Can you spell that?
Guduchi.
I had one last thing for my mom. She suffers from vertigo. And I took her to the clinic and they did the Epley maneuver.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that she fell on her shoulder. And since then, when she turns to the left is when everything goes spiral.
Yeah, there's
Nothing was broken.
there's about 7 causes for, hopefully it's not like Meniere's or something like autoimmune or whatever, but there is a maneuver where you can actually take like almost lay the person back, it's like realigning them, across. I will say blood pressure plays a big role too, circulation and oxygen. If someone was low on a pulse ox or whatever, they're not getting oxygen, that's a big one for the brain. So sometimes just making sure they're getting oxygen up to the brain, especially if they turn their head, or if they, look up or whatever. There is for seizures, for absent seizures, like if a child, you put them up against a wall and have them, and they just they're gone. Gone for and they're like, where was I at? It's almost, you could tell that then that's probably like a lack of oxygen, a blood sugar, or maybe blood sugar issue. As soon as you get that fixed, that goes away. That's very common with children with absent seizures. Like you'll see them go. They're not like, where'd they go? And they come back. So a lot of that I would definitely be assessing like blood pressure and all that type of stuff. But one of the top things is just, actually, one is infection too. If someone has an infection, it can actually cause different things. There's a whole list of like 7 things that really tie into that. And one of the more serious is like Meniere's, like where you have like autoimmune, and that one's bad because you like turn. They have a lot to do with one of our areas of knowing where we're at in space has a lot to do with our ear, and or the inner ear and whatnot. So you can get things lodged, and by doing this maneuver, it's almost like it's almost like one of those little machines where you're like, I don't know, little kid machines where you're trying to get the ball in the corner. It's like you're taking it and rolling it around, and it's actually done pretty slowly and across, and you put the person back up. And sometimes they only need that one time, and it's a game changer, where they feel like they're spinning, they have to get down, like the world's,
It's been a whole lot better.
Ever since doing that, yeah. There is one too where you put your head, like if people have, now, my question is, are you spinning or is the world spin? Like, and which way are you going? Because you can actually tell. Okay, yeah.
So it's probably maybe
So.
But the spin goes around.
The
spin does go around. And so the world, and I walked beside my bed. My husband was sitting on the bed getting ready to go into bed. And I was just going into the bathroom. And I walked towards the bathroom. And that spin started. And it took my head around and slapped my head right into his face. And he said, what did you do that for? And I said, I didn't do it. It does it itself. So
Do you, whenever you lift, when you get up from sleeping or anything like that, do you feel that? Or you have your head turned a certain way or looking up to do, like, grab anything? Feel that at all?
I took the fall. I've never had this thing.
Okay.
I took the fall on this shoulder.
Oh.
Completely. And she said it doesn't happen when she looks this way, but it happens when she looks this way. So I'm thinking they're related. I don't know.
Actually, it's interesting, too. Someone had mentioned high blood pressure can be a startle reflex. This is one thing that's interesting when people have autoimmunity of the thyroid. If you're losing your balance, the body will naturally, the fight or flight response is right in that area. And one of the first things that happens, your blood pressure goes up. Because you're getting ready to fall. Falling is serious. It's a threat to the body. So someone can have constant high blood pressure just because their balance is off. So you won't be able to address it until some of those things. So it's hard to say without, getting into it.
Okay, so go back to detoxing, because I've had some conflicting information, and
There's a lot of information.
yeah, when you're detoxing, I've heard, what's your protocol? I guess I should say that, because I've heard if you detox just one organ, it's sort of a waste. And some say you should start from the outside and go in, and some say you should start from the inside and go out. So I don't know how to do it.
Right, and that's, if you have a protocol is not going to work for everyone. That's my protocol. If you have a protocol for detoxing, it's probably not going to be specific to you. And there's things generally you can do for the hollow organs versus the solid organs, but the amino acid. Okay, you got to go. We can maybe get into that more later. I guess it is time, so we are going. So hallelujah. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Is it the talent show now, or what have we got going on? Supper? Oh, something important. Okay.
And then we're going to come in here for the talent show.
Okay, sweet. Shalom.